Hey, everybody. We got a new episode here. We're actually going to do a review of a new movie tonight. Nothing could be stranger than to be in some danger with Dr. Strange.
Wow, where did you get that?
I just made it up.
Steven, don't quit your day job, man. I'm just going to tell you that right now.
Oh, man. You know what, people? You guys need to change your reality. Wow. What's in that coffee? Something's happening. Yeah, we're going to do a new movie review tonight. It's been, I don't know, a little while since we've done. We did Deepwater Horizon some weeks back here, and we've been doing some video ones in between, but this one's going to be the old school audio one only for you here, and talk a little bit about the movie Doctor Strange, what we thought about it, and maybe at the end we'll have a little cutoff where we get into maybe a few of the little spoilers. So we might have to give a warning for those of you who don't want to go there. So yeah,
I don't think there's any way you could really spoil this movie for people.
not really too much, but I understand. I'm one of those people who I get mad at trailers sometimes, and so let alone what somebody could tell me about a movie. It's just I want to experience it on my own. So I like to respect those people.
I think you have to be truly a hardcore fan of the Marvel movies. Like you just wake up every morning and throw in Iron Man 2, and that's how you get your day going.
Thor: The Dark World gets
Yeah.
me going, man. It's my adrenaline
Yeah,
shot.
I think that's the only person we'd be spoiling this movie for, and I don't think that's. Maybe we have a listener like that. If you do, let us know.
I think we do, because in that theater tonight, there were some things that I didn't even really consider a twist, more so as they just felt like they needed to say it. And they're like audible gasps, and I'd be like, how are you, they seem, when we went, it seemed like you're somebody who cares about these movies. It's like, is that really shocking to you? I mean, that's what everything's been leading toward. But anyway, still good to be respectful. So yeah, we're going to get into the movie Doctor Strange. Were you excited for this movie, Dakota?
I was. Probably.
Were you excited? Let's go back. A few years ago when they're like, "We're gonna make a Doctor Strange movie." Were you like, "Yes, finally"?
Not really. I think my excitement really kicked in probably when they debuted the trailer, and
okay.
I think it was. Oh good Lord! I probably saw it 3 or 4 times during the summer.
Yeah.
And that's when I kind of got excited for it, just because when it comes to magic, doing it on screen is really, really hard.
Yeah, it's hard to make it look natural. Harry Potter sometimes doesn't look very natural, where people always make fun of how they're straining really hard holding a wand out. It's like, how do you make it look believable?
Yeah. But anyway, moving on. Plus, it's always kind of cool to see Benedict Cumberbatch in a movie, especially, I don't know, the guy has a lot of charisma.
Yeah, he usually, he's a guy who, he just carries himself in a movie, and you're kind of always curious of what he's going to do in a role and things like that. Yeah, even on the show Sherlock, it's just the way he portrays Sherlock is so unique, in a lot of ways. And so I was kind of interested. But where I probably got interested, because at first when they were like, we're going to do a Doctor Strange movie, it's like, oh, that's cool. I remember Doctor Strange. He'd show up in the animated shows of just the different Marvel TV shows where there was Spider-Man or something. They'd have Doctor Strange be in a few episodes. And it's like, oh, that guy's kind of cool. But it just kind of seemed to be the natural place Marvel needed to go next with their universe here of bringing magic into it now. And so I kind of got that too, but I was just kind of more like, could be cool. Where I kind of started getting intrigued and a little excited was when they brought on Scott Derrickson to be the director, because he's kind of a unique director in that all of the movies he's done are interesting, even when they're kind of garbage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A
little too well.
Yeah, and by like garbage, I mean like he's the guy who remade The Day the Earth Stood Still with Keanu Reeves, and it was interesting, and I think he had a lot of good things going on and maybe even good intentions. I mean, if you're going to remake a classic like that, you apparently have like some vision of how you think you can make it better and modern. And I think he did in a certain sense, but at the same time, it was just like lame. That's like the nicest word I can think of for that. But at the same time, he's a guy who came out of really a kind of a horror movie kind of background. He was always intrigued by horror movies, and then that's kind of where his break came, was with the Exorcism of Emily Rose. He also directed Sinister. And did he do Sinister too? Did he direct that, or did he just produce?
I think he just produced.
I think he did too. And so he kind of was a guy who came out of that background, and he gave a lot of interesting kind of different take on those, because it was like, you could have been like, another exorcism movie, another ghost movie, but those were both hits in their time because he kind of gave a new unique vision to them, with the stories that they had within them. And so I was intrigued when that happened. And then of course, because he was attached, then names like Keanu Reeves and Ethan Hawke were being thrown out as possible Doctor Stranges because he had worked with them. And I was like, I could maybe see Ethan Hawke, but not Keanu Reeves. And then, of course, it was neither of them. That's what it ended up being. But Scott Derrickson only has so much say, I'm sure, in who gets cast, because I'm sure Marvel has ultimate say in who they would like to get in those roles.
Yeah, I think maybe Keanu Reeves and Ethan Hawke are a little too expensive too, especially
and terrible at a role like this. I just think.
Yeah.
They'd be terrible.
I mean, they both have roles that were great.
Yeah.
But this isn't for them.
Right. Yeah. There's movies where they're both fine in, but not this.
You would never throw Steve Buscemi in a bad suit and be like, give us your best Dark Knight.
Now, if that were like a Funny or Die sketch, maybe I'd watch that. But yeah, as a movie, that'd be kind of a waste of $180 million. But
yeah.
Yeah, okay, so Benedict Cumberbatch, Scott Derrickson, and then filling out some of the other roles. It actually has a really good cast. I mean, I'm kind of indifferent about Rachel McAdams, but bringing in, I don't even know how to say his name right, Chiwetel Ejiofor. You guys know what I'm talking about.
Forge.
You guys know what I'm talking about. That really cool black guy who's in a lot of stuff. And then Benedict Wong. He's a guy who's been showing up in supporting roles a lot lately and seems to do good jobs in them all. You have Mads Mikkelsen as your villain, who's been gained a lot of steam. I guess the show's over now because of the show Hannibal.
Or is it?
Or is it over? It is a horror show.
He swears it isn't, but we all know it is.
It's the axe has fallen. And then Tilda Swinton being the controversial choice as the Ancient One, but another person who it's like, what are they going to bring to this role? Because it's just another kind of quirky, interesting actor or actress, whatever you want.
Yeah, I think she's done fantasy films before.
Yeah, some of you might know her as the White Witch in The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, where she, in a way, was good at that role, but at the same time wasn't, because C.S. Lewis kind of describes the witch as very beautiful, and she's kind of more scary than beautiful. But yeah, she was in an interesting Keanu Reeves movie. You remember Constantine?
I do.
That was another controversial role for her, where she played Gabriel. Right? Was it Gabriel the Archangel?
Yeah, she played Gabriel, and a lot of people were like, "What are you trying to do?"
Yeah, like that. That was an interesting. So I mean, I'm sure she's kind of known for controversial roles in controversial movies. So I'm sure when people are freaking out about her being the Ancient One, she was one who was able to handle that. And so you had a really pretty interesting cast going on here. And so it kind of became like man, this movie has a cast that could make it pretty good, so kind of going into this. And then, man, after a couple of those trailers, yeah, you did get pretty excited because there were just some interesting things going on in those trailers, what they were going to do with it. And then we go to the movie, and we accidentally got the movie started like 5 minutes in, and I don't know, the theater got all goofed up, and then they had to like rewind it. Sounds like it started over for us.
Yeah, this whole situation with our local movie theater is getting interesting, folks.
Yeah. I did think it was interesting how this movie just kind of started.
Yeah, they jumped right in. There was
It said, well, first off, there was a really long Marvel Studio. Marvel Studios once again changed their opening Marvel Studios thing to be even longer. But then after that, the movie just goes. There's no title card. It just goes. We don't think there's a title card unless our theater goofed that up too.
I'm thinking the director maybe did that because he's like, okay, that logo was a little too long. We'll just jump right into it.
Yeah, we just need to get this going, or CinemaSins is going to have a field day with this. So, yeah, it just kind of starts going. You get right into what's going on. And I don't know, I kind of appreciated that it just kind of started going. Not in a way where it was like, what's going on? But it just started happening. Things just started happening and needed to happen.
Yeah, I think maybe that was a choice to just kind of show people, oh, this ain't your usual Marvel world that you're used to.
This ain't your mama's Marvel movie. Yeah, that could be.
Yeah.
Could be. Because not only is strange in the title, I would say everything about this movie felt different than any other Marvel movie that's ever been done.
Yeah, that's pretty fair to say. This is shockingly, I know a lot of people say Marvel villains are kind of, aren't very good, but I thought from the get-go we kind of had a pretty good villain, and he's right there in the first scene, and you see him and his cronies kind of, I want to spoil anything for you, but you see them kind of just being evil.
You understood what his purpose was.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think that just helps too, because other villains are like, you understand their purpose, but it's like, or I should say, even when you do understand their purpose, you're like, okay, so why you, sometimes it's like, even something like, why are you going about it this way or something, whereas this, this was such a, yeah, he was an interesting villain, and it kind of made sense, I guess, a little bit more.
Yeah, if anything, I was surprised they didn't go into his backstory. Like, he showed up, after having his family killed by, I don't know, the mafia, and he's homeless and angry, and, the Ancient One taught him how to channel his feelings and to be this sorcerer, but that wasn't enough for him. He wanted more. And they could have done a lot of things with him, but thankfully they kind of played it down.
Yeah, and I think part of that was they were just smart in realizing, in a lot of ways, his origin story is similar to a lot of villain origin stories that we've seen in other movies. Like, you could almost say it was similar to Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Like, he was wooed by having greater strength through darkness. But by downplaying that and focusing on more his present wants, it helps him be a stronger villain.
Yeah.
Instead of having like here we go, it's the old backstory, we're gonna have a flashback, and so yeah, I just
we saw this movie. It's a Thursday night. I have a feeling by Friday, probably by Monday afternoon, I'll be seeing some. I'm sure someone's gonna get some dialogue from Harry Potter and splice it into this movie. Because he essentially is the story's Voldemort, the villain played by Mads Mikkelsen. So I'm just waiting for that.
Kinda. I mean, and that's the thing. Like, there is a sense where he could be the Voldemort or Voldemort, whichever way you want to say it, or a Darth Vader type thing. But instead, they were able to make him not seem so that, which did benefit the movie in a lot of ways. And if there were flashback scenes that were filmed, somebody was smart in just cutting them out. So if those do exist. And so I think as far as the villain, I thought Mads Mikkelsen did a fine job. I mean, they're in a sense, he didn't have a whole lot to do, but at the same time, he had everything to do. And so that's why it's kind of interesting in that vein too, I guess. But really the main person who you really had to buy into in this movie, more so than anyone, would obviously be Benedict Cumberbatch. And what I thought was interesting about meeting this character is he was a jerk. He was like, okay, so you guys know, I'm sure if any of you are into this Marvel stuff, in the first Iron Man, Tony Stark is just a cocky son of a gun, in the movie starts, and he kind of gets more or less humbled through circumstances and realizing kind of the wrongs of his past. Doctor Strange might be even more of a jerky jerk face than Tony Stark ever came across, because Stephen Strange has had like this ego that he's very smart, and it isn't like that. Here's this thing where he goes, "Oh, I know I'm really smart." Stephen Strange is the guy who's like, nobody in this room is smarter or better than me, and I know it. He's kind of that guy, and he lives his life like saying those types of things out loud to the people around him, which kind of ends up isolating him in a sense, because everything he does is driven by him knowing he's the greatest and making himself famous and rich. That's really all he wants to do. But all of those things are done in like the most, going about them in probably like the most selfish way possible, like where he's not really attempting to help anyone. If he is helping people, it's so that he can really just help himself. And so he's really despicable when he's introduced.
Yeah, it becomes kind of obvious he doesn't exactly care about saving lives. It's all about, oh, what can I do that's going to just reap glory and rewards for me?
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a scene kind of in the beginning of this where he says something like, "Oh, you're trying to ruin my perfect streak," when someone suggests a patient to him that apparently has something inoperable. And even though it's probably within his skill set to try to fix it, he's like, I'm going to pass.
Yeah, he doesn't want to help because, he's more concerned about his scorecard than he is about possibly helping someone. It's just like, yeah. And so you're like, man, I hate this guy. It's kind of really how it comes. And then we have, the whole incident that happens where, and this isn't spoiler because it's in the previews and things, and it's why he ends up going to meeting the Ancient One, is his pride and ego are really the reason he ends up being in a car accident that destroy his hands. Like, the nerve endings in his hands and everything, they're just destroyed. And what I thought was fascinating was that wasn't what humbled him, because he was still a jerky jerk face after the thing, because he's sitting there and he sees his hands totally like in the things, and he's like, "What did they do to my hands?" And they tell him, and they're like, no one could have done better. They did everything they could. No one could have done better. And he goes, "I could have done better." And like he's still like being like this egotistical maniac and acting like they made it worse than it needed to be. The people who were helping him, he like blames more than he blames himself for getting in the accident, which is just kind of interesting. Like that still wasn't the thing that really broke his pride. And so I thought that was an interesting character thing, because that could have really been the point when humility strikes, but it wasn't. And it almost kind of made you care for him more, not necessarily then, but in just trying to understand, it made you care more about his character development and where they were going to go and how he would end up going. At least I thought so. I don't know what you were thinking there.
Yeah, he's painted as the sort of man that can't really be redeemed. There's in movies that kind of have this character where he's damaged. You could kind of see some good aspects of him, but with this character of Doctor Strange, you just don't even want to kind of cheer for him.
Yeah. They never gave there was never a save the cat moment with him. They wanted to make sure you knew he was despicable. Screenwriters use this thing, and you know it without knowing it, where if they want to make sure you know you should like someone, they'll have a little thing where they'll have them, help somebody across the street, or somebody drops something and they pick it up and hand it to them and smile, or it's called save the cat moment because they literally will save a cat or something, but it's something screenwriters use to make sure you know you're supposed to like that person. Well, they made sure they had no save the cat moments with Doctor Strange, so you were always like, ugh, this guy is just kind of a scumbag in a lot of ways. But at the same time, and maybe it's because we know he's going to become Doctor Strange, is you're kind of like watching going, like, wait, where is he going to go? When is he going to finally break, in a sense? So I thought that was interesting. But really, what stole the show in a lot of ways, and I'm finally feeling like I'm recovered over, is the look of this movie and what they did in this movie. And I would love to see the storyboards for this movie, because you feel like the opening sequence is like kind of just preparing you for what the movie's going to be, with like buildings twisting in on themselves and kind of this whole multiverse that they introduce. But then every time you get into like a new sequence that involves those things, they up the ante with what they do with it, and it's so cool. I just felt like everyone got cooler and cooler with what they were able to do with using this multiverse idea that's introduced in this movie. Did you think that those were really cool?
Yeah, I did.
But at the same time, your eyes were like all buggy at the end of this week. There was so many like MC Etcher type moments where it was like things going in on themselves and just like flipping and turns. It was like Inception times 1,000 with some of the twisties and things like that. But it ended up making a lot of cool sequences, whether they were, quote unquote chase scene or a fight scene or whatever they happened to be. It made a lot of cool scenes with how they thought to use them. You know what dawned on me when I was watching this movie too, Dakota, is I felt like this was a better Green Lantern. Did you get that feeling? Is just in the basic setup in this movie in a lot of ways. So you got this guy who's got a big ego who ends up joining this crew of a bunch of other people, dare I even say core, where they teach him to open his mind to use a power he has to stop a bigger evil, and they'll be stronger if they do it together. There's just a lot of parallels to Green Lantern in a lot of ways. But obviously there was a lot of not parallels to Green Lantern in this movie too. But even looking at the parallels, this movie did those things better.
Yeah, the effects on this movie really helped to sell it.
Yeah, the effects were really well done in this movie. Even, I would say, even better than some of the effects that were in like Age of Ultron, which those are like their flagship movies.
Yeah, and like I said, magic in itself is just really hard to do. And, with the whole, actors and their whole hand movements, kind of doing these gestures, it could have came off as looking really silly. Yeah. But they were able to avoid all that. And it came off really good.
Yeah, it just felt like every scene that involved magic, or I think what they must have done is they sat down and said, what are the ground rules for how this magic is going to work? And so it's like, it wasn't just like they were just like moving their hands for the sake of moving their hands, but you visually see and understand how each movement of their hand means something and is done for a purpose. And I think that's what really sold the magic, is that you were able to visually see that every movement of their hands meant something, and was because how this magic works is they're really channeling energy from the multiverse And so each movement of their hands is really like bringing this energy together to use. And so that's kind of their way of explaining it. And then so you kind of see that happen. And I just thought that's what really helped sell it, was just you understood everything meant something.
Yeah.
Even if you didn't know why exactly they were doing it, you could tell it still was purposeful. So I think that really helped. Any negatives, Dakota? Any real big negatives you have on this movie?
Not really. Something that it's not negative, but the movie kind of moved along really fast. They kind of implied that Stephen Strange was going to be studying all these books for years and years, and it seems like a week goes by.
Yeah.
And like at the end of the week, he's just like,
right. Would definitely one of mine would be like, and maybe it's because it was magic, but I was really having trouble understanding the time span of parts of this movie. Like, okay, was he there a day or 7 years? Or, I mean, obviously it wasn't, it's not 7 years, but you don't know if it's a day or 10 months in some parts. And I found that kind of frustrating because, you were trying to understand what. And so, the time frame things were kind of frustrating. The other thing is, like we said, what one thing that was nice about this movie is that it did have a villain that felt a little more. It felt like he had more of a point to it, more so than like, well, we better have some bad guy to thwart things in the movie. It's like, well, no, he was really the reason everything was kind of the way it was, and so he was really like a catalyst in a lot of the events of the movie, and so kind of helped him be a better villain than like, I don't know, one I always think of as Malekith. Like, what was his point in Thor: The Dark World? I mean, it was just like, it just felt like they needed somebody just to like put a hiccup in everything, and so it's like, oh, I guess we could use the Dark Elves or something. So,
yeah, I don't know. Another complaint would kind of be that it just kind of goes to like what the time frame of this whole thing is. It seems like the villains only really go into action when they kind of need to. It's like they're sitting there talking in the library, oh, don't do this, don't do that, because, this could happen. And the next thing you know, what they're talking about kind of happens.
Yeah.
They unleash this evil, and it's like, that was convenient. Maybe they bugged the place and they were listening to you guys. They're like, this is what we got to do.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that.
But I don't know. This is actually a pretty solid film. And I don't know, I just like the look of it, even if the visuals, the CGI work did kind of mess with your eyes a little bit.
Yeah, and I guess with that whole messing with the eyes, I didn't mean that necessarily in a negative way. It was just like, everything was moving.
Yeah,
everything was moving, and so it's like your eyes almost were like, when it was over, like, wow, my eyes just got to work out.
Yeah, one thing that I thought was really cool too is, for a movie like this that's based in magic, there was a lot of fight scenes, and that some really impressive fight scenes too.
Yeah, right.
Almost
it was like or fight/chase, however you want to put them. But
they took what was going on in Inception, flipped it on its head, cut it into a bunch of different pieces, and then put it back together, and it was like, oh, beautiful, and I thought it looked really good.
Yeah, those things did just look really neat. It was just kind of it was just refreshing to see that, because this movie really can stand alone. They didn't, which is a good thing. Like, there weren't all these things where it's like real big, heavy plot points that went into like a bigger thing, but it was its own self-contained story for the most part, to where it was like, man, it just made it enjoyable, where the whole time you're not going, well, I don't understand why this person isn't involved or this person isn't involved or something, like something that sometimes kind of happens.
Yeah, I think
in some of the other ones.
I think if this movie had been a 3-hour movie, we probably would have been wishing it was over by hour 2.
Yeah. And that was kind of nice how this movie did keep its runtime tight. Or just, it didn't overstay its welcome. with having too much going on or bloating itself.
For those of you wondering what we're talking about, see Age of Ultron.
Yeah. Age of Ultron would be definitely probably the best Marvel movie, like just too much going on. Yep. And then on the DC side, BVS.
Yeah. Or some would argue The Dark Knight Rises.
Well, that's true. But Dark Knight Rises wasn't trying to juggle like a franchise so much, just a kind of a self-contained franchise. But yeah, so I guess with that being said, what are kind of your final thoughts on this movie?
My final thoughts. This movie blew my mind away.
You should just stopped at blew. This movie blew.
Yeah. Would have been nice if I had just left it off there. Then I was like, my mind away. Yeah. No, it was, for a movie. One thing I did like about this movie too, it seemed colorful. I'm kind of tired of.
Yeah, thank you.
Kind of tired of. all the costumes got to be dark and they all got to, the color palette has to be just really, really, just dark visually. It's like there was color in this, and I thought it worked.
Yeah, there was this color. It was just visually fun. He's just like, it
was easy on the eyes. Let's put it like that.
But I remembered. It came back to me. My only other negative thing before I get into my final thoughts would be like, I felt like sometimes Marvel gets a little awkward with where they think they need to throw in a humorous line. And I felt like there was a few spots in this where it's like, okay, this movie's lighthearted enough where you wouldn't have had to have like that extra little like actual jokey line in there, Yeah. I just felt like there's a few spots that kind of overdid that. But Marvel has a tendency to always go a little too jokey at times. But, that was kind of just minor thing. But yeah, my final thoughts on the movie obviously were that I really enjoyed it. I'm pretty sure at this point, it's pretty obvious, but it was fun. The one thing that really struck me was it's been a long time since I've been at a superhero movie where I'm kind of that engaged in the action taking place. Like I found myself kind of like leaning forward and my heart wasn't necessarily like picking up pace, but just I was really like into it. I was like feeling it and like, oh man. And I think part of it was just like, they really just brought you in. They brought you into the stuff going on. And I really felt myself, being drawn in. And so I found that just really great. And so that was just another plus I have for this movie was just, feeling that engaged into it, being kind of just sucked into the movie.
This movie did something that actually I think Christopher Nolan needs to realize. It had an epic scope and a lot of epic things happen, but the runtime was under 2 hours.
Yeah.
Can we just get an amen?
To be fair, it was an hour and 55 minutes. But still, I think what a lot of people forget is, maybe I'm a little biased here, but one of the greatest movies ever made was like right around 2 hours. It didn't have to be 3 hours.
Are we talking about RoboCop? Yes.
Talking about Jurassic Park.
Oh, yes, that as well.
Jurassic Park. And Star Wars.
Yes, Star Wars
is under 2 hours. I mean, a lot of people kind of forget because we live in this age where the word epic is associated with 180 minutes, or at least 160 minutes or something. Whereas no, I mean, you can make a grand scale movie. And if it needs to be that long, okay, if you can make a movie that shows me it needs to be that long, great. But I think this and Star Wars and Jurassic Parks, those are proof that you can hang in that 120 range and be just fine. If you stick to the story you're telling and just flesh that out, yeah, it can happen. And they did that with this. And I guess as far as where I'd put this on the old grade scale is
Yay, grades.
B plus. I think is where I'd put it.
Oh, okay.
So, and I think the reason I have to give it a B plus is just because of the movies I put into. Even though I really enjoyed this movie, when I think about the movies that are A's, this one isn't quite in that category, so I'd give it a B plus.
Yeah. The funny thing is, I was aiming for a B plus too. Like I said, the two qualms I had with it, but it also seemed like they kind of padded it a little bit. I can't remember the actor's name, but there's another doctor in the very beginning who seems like he kind of has a rivalry with. I thought he was just kind of thrown in there for just pad the beginning of it a little bit.
A little bit. I felt like maybe he was there to just remind us of Doctor Strange's ego and pride issues. But, yeah.
Yeah. But, like I said, B plus film.
Yeah, and this is definitely one I would recommend for the big screen. Just because of what they do with the magic. And I think just the fact, like I said, that I found myself just leaning into like what was going on and being really engaged. I think part of that was just having that, seeing it on that big screen and having that experience with it. It was fun. It was just fun to have that, and it was just cool to see a new hero join this world that I care about, and it'll be kind of fun to see what they do with him. And I just want to throw this little teaser in there. There was an inanimate object in this movie that stole a few scenes. That was pretty awesome too. I won't tell you what it is, but that was pretty cool. I liked how they used that object. So, a little teaser for you. But I think with that, we'll wrap up this episode. I realized as we were going, there was really nothing we needed to spoil to tell you about this movie, so it didn't really matter. We didn't get into a spoiler section. And, but yeah, with that, we are on Facebook, obviously. That's a place where we like to put our things the most. It just seems, like I've talked about on previous episodes, it's just the easiest place to get everything out to you people out there. And so we hope you're liking us on there, keeping up on things. Also, if you subscribe to us on YouTube or iTunes or one of those podcast places, that is huge to us. That means a lot. It just it's just kind of a boost to us knowing that you're there and listening and stuff. Because sometimes I think, you're like, well, we listen, and we're very glad you listen. But it means even more when you not just listen, but also kind of subscribe and things like that, because then it just kind of just gives us that little extra boost in like, oh, that's cool to see that we got this kind of group of people actually are kind of supporting us, which is fun. So yeah, if you'll do that, we hope you do. But I think with that, we'll wrap up this episode, our strange episode. So this is Steven.
And this is Dakota.
Change your reality, people.